How did Greece survive a collapse that erased entire civilizations from the map? Around 1200 BCE, the eastern Mediterranean began to fracture. Cities burned, palaces fell silent, trade routes that had fed empires for centuries vanished almost overnight. From Anatolia to the Levant, from Cyprus to Egypt's borders, once powerful societies entered sudden decline. Written records stopped, monumental architecture ceased, populations disappeared from the archaeological record. Yet in Greece, something different happened. Palaces fell there too. Mycenaean centers burned. Linear B tablets stopped being written. Kings vanished, but the people did not. Archaeology shows destruction but not disappearance. Or neighboring civilizations collapsed into absence, Greece endured into continuity. And that contradiction is where the story begins. Across mainland Greece, the late Bronze Age world was dominated by palace-states: Mycenae, Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes. Each ruled surrounding territories through centralized administration. Grain, bronze, labor, and weapons flowed into palaces. Linear B tablets tracked everything. It was efficient, it was fragile. When archaeologists first uncovered these sites in the early 20th century, the pattern seemed familiar. Burn layers, abandoned buildings, broken storage jars. It looked like invasion. For decades, scholars believed Greece fell to violent newcomers, sweeping away Mycenaean civilization and replacing it with new populations. That explanation made sense at the time. Similar destruction appeared across the eastern Mediterranean. The Hittite capital at Hattusa was abandoned. Ugarit was destroyed and never rebuilt. Cyprus lost its urban centers. Egypt barely survived repeated attacks recorded in inscriptions describing foreign invaders arriving by land and sea. If everyone else collapsed, Greece should have vanished too. But the soil told a quieter story. In Greece, destruction layers were followed not by emptiness, but by reoccupation. Settlements shrank, but they did not disappear. Palaces were not rebuilt, yet villages remained. People moved uphill, inland, away from exposed coasts. Architecture became simpler. Burials changed. Writing vanished. But human presence continued without interruption. This survival was not obvious at first. Early excavations focused on palaces, the symbols of collapse. Later work shifted attention to smaller sites: farmsteads, hilltop villages, seasonal settlements. There, continuity became visible. Ceramics tell part of the story. Late Mycenaean pottery styles evolved gradually into early Iron Age forms. No sudden replacement, no foreign toolkit arriving fully formed. Just adaptation, generation by generation. Local clays, local styles, local hands. Radiocarbon dates reinforced the pattern. Occupation layers overlapped smoothly across the supposed collapse horizon. There was no population gap. Then came the human remains. Burials from before and after the collapse showed continuity in physical anthropology. Skeletal measurements remained consistent. Diet, reconstructed from isotopic analysis of bones and teeth, showed changes in food stress but not in population identity. People ate less variety, more reliance on local resources, fewer imports, but they were the same people. That raised a deeper question. If Greece did not survive because invaders replaced the population, then why did it survive at all? The answer began to emerge through geography. Greece was never a single centralized state like the Hittite Empire or Egypt. It was fractured by mountains, valleys, and islands. Even during the height of Mycenaean power, authority was regional. Palaces controlled territories, but most people lived outside them. Farmers, herders, fishers. When palaces fell, those lives could continue. In contrast, societies like the Hittites depended on centralized systems. When the capital fell, the system collapsed with it. Administration, redistribution, and political authority vanished together. Greece's fragmentation became its shield. Archaeologists also noticed patterns of movement during the collapse. Coastal sites were often abandoned. Inland and elevated sites grew. This was not flight from invaders alone. It was adaptation to instability. Reduced trade made coastal exposure dangerous. Communities repositioned themselves to survive without long-distance networks. Bronze was another vulnerability. Bronze Age civilizations depended on tin, a resource not locally available in most regions. When trade routes broke down, bronze production failed. Greece adapted faster than others by shifting toward iron, a locally accessible material. Early iron tools appear in Greece during this period not as symbols of advancement, but of necessity. This transition was uneven and difficult. Iron was harder to work. Tools were inferior at first, but it allowed communities to remain independent of collapsed trade systems. Where other civilizations depended on external supply chains, Greece learned to live without them. Still, adaptation alone does not explain everything. The most controversial evidence came later, from ancient DNA. When genomes from Mycenaean burials were compared to those from early Iron Age Greece, the expected signal of population replacement was missing. Instead, continuity dominated. Minor genetic inputs appeared, consistent with small-scale movement and intermarriage, not mass invasion. Archaeology had reached its limit. DNA confirmed what the soil suggested. The people who lived through the collapse were largely descendants of those who came before it. This changed how the Bronze Age collapse itself was understood. Rather than a single cause, evidence pointed to a convergence of pressures: climate instability, drought, earthquakes, internal rebellions, and the breakdown of interconnected systems. Civilizations built for complexity failed when complexity became a liability. Greece survived because it was never fully dependent on that complexity. As centuries passed, the so-called Greek Dark Age unfolded. Writing disappeared, monumental construction stopped, population numbers declined. But this was not a void, it was a reset. During this period, new social forms emerged, communities reorganized, oral tradition preserved memory, iron tools spread. By the 8th century BCE, writing returned, not as palace accounting, but as alphabetic expression. Poetry, law, identity. Out of survival came transformation. The city-states of classical Greece did not rise from conquest or replacement, they rose from endurance. The people who debated politics in early assemblies were descendants of those who had survived famine, isolation, and uncertainty centuries earlier. This is what makes Greece different. Other Bronze Age civilizations collapsed into silence. Greece collapsed into continuity. The implications extend beyond archaeology. They challenge how collapse itself is understood. Survival doesn't always look like prosperity. Sometimes it looks like shrinking, adapting, and refusing to disappear. Modern Greece still carries this inheritance. Genetic studies show deep continuity stretching back to the Bronze Age and earlier. Cultural memory, landscape use, and settlement patterns echo ancient decisions made under pressure. And beneath known sites lie others still unexcavated. Villages that never made it into history. Communities that survived quietly, leaving no texts, only bones and soil. If Greece endured when others fell because it was flexible rather than powerful, decentralized rather than imperial, then what does that say about how civilizations truly survive? When systems fail, is survival found in dominance or in the ability to adapt without vanishing?